The train screeched and hissed as it pulled into Bear Creek Station. Its iron wheels ground against the rails like a creature protesting its long journey. From one of the last cars stepped a young woman in a rose-colored traveling dress. She clutched a worn leather satchel and a folded letter stained with thumbprints. Margaret Wells took a long breath of dry prairie air and whispered, "Here goes nothing." She wasn't the usual sort of mail-order bride. She hadn't sent dozens of letters or crafted stories about a hopeful future. In fact, the letter that brought her here wasn't hers at all. It belonged to Millie Boone, the daughter of the man she was about to meet. 4 weeks earlier, Margaret had received a response to a letter she never sent. Inside was a note in a young girl's handwriting. "Dear Miss Wells, I saw your ad and picked you for my pa. He needs someone kind and gentle. I'm too little to run a house, and he's too tired to laugh. Please come." Margaret hadn't placed any ad, but the desperation in the child's words had wrapped around her heart and refused to let go. After all, Margaret had spent most of her life being unwanted. She knew the ache of silence at dinner, the weight of a father's bitterness. She understood the pain of feeling like a burden when all you want is to be loved. So, she'd packed what little she had, boarded the train, and headed west. Not for love, but to bring light where it was clearly running low. Meanwhile, Silas Boone dismounted his horse with a grunt and a wince. His joints ached more than usual after fencing all morning. The sun was merciless, and he was already behind on spring branding. He didn't have time for interruptions, let alone surprises. But as he walked toward the house, Millie burst through the front door. Her skirts flew and her hair was braided unevenly. "Pa," she shouted, "she's here! The bride from the train!" Silas froze mid-step. "The what?" Millie beamed, her eyes wide and hopeful. "I wrote the letters. I found her in the paper." His boots thudded hard against the porch. "Millie Jean Boone, what have you done?" But before she could answer, a soft voice came from the gate. "I believe that would be me." Margaret stood tall, her chin lifted despite the exhaustion in her eyes. She didn't flinch beneath Silas's hard stare. If anything, she looked resolved. Margaret woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of strong coffee drifting through cracks in the floorboards. The small room Millie had shown her to was bare but clean, at least now. She'd spent most of the evening dusting, chasing out a mouse, and airing the windows. The Boone house wasn't broken, just neglected, much like its owner. Downstairs, the kitchen hummed with the low clatter of tin cups and boots scuffing against the floor. She entered with quiet confidence, wearing a simple cotton dress and her hair pulled back in a braid. Silas sat at the head of the table, mug in hand, eyes sharp. Millie sat beside him, buttering cornbread like it was the most important task in the world. No one spoke until Margaret poured herself some coffee. "You planning to stay?" Silas asked flatly. "I'm planning to help," Margaret answered without flinching. Millie grinned into her bread. Silas leaned back in his chair.
I didn't ask for help. No, Margaret replied, stirring in a bit of sugar. But you clearly need it. The room went still. One of the ranch hands at the doorway muttered, "She's got grit." Margaret turned to Millie. "Let me know what needs doing." Millie beamed. "The barn roof leaks, the laundry's been waiting 2 weeks, and Pa keeps saying he'll fix the kitchen cabinet but hasn't yet." "Millie!" Silas growled. "What? It's true." Margaret bit back a smile. "Sounds like a full day." She tied on an apron and got to work. By midday, the Boone house had begun to change. Curtains opened, dust flew. The floor shone under new polish. Margaret sang softly while she worked. Nothing fancy, just old hymns her mother used to hum while baking. Millie followed her like a puppy. They peeled potatoes together, hung laundry, even organized a crooked bookshelf in the parlor. For the first time in what felt like years, the house held warmth. Silas watched from the porch, arms folded. He didn't stop her, but he didn't smile either. He was too used to things falling apart, too used to women leaving. Margaret noticed. After supper, she stepped onto the porch where Silas was oiling his saddle. "You're mad she wrote to me?" she said. Silas didn't look up. "She had no right." "She had need," Margaret replied, "and from what I've seen, she's not the only one in this house aching." He stood, brushing off his hands. "You don't know me." "No," she said, meeting his eyes, "but I see a man who's forgotten what a home feels like." Silas's jaw tensed. "You came here to build a life off a lie." "I came here because a little girl believed her father deserved love again." That silenced him. She stepped back. "You don't have to like me, but I'm not going anywhere, unless Millie tells me to." She turned and walked inside, the screen door creaking behind her. Silas remained on the porch, the saddle now forgotten. And in the distance, the wind carried something strange. It almost sounded like laughter.
Rain arrived like a punch to the chest, sudden, sharp, and loud against the tin roof. One moment, the sun baked the land golden. The next, clouds gathered like an army above Bear Creek. Margaret was halfway through folding laundry when the first drop splattered her forehead. Then came the downpour. She dropped the basket and ran out barefoot into the mud, yanking sheets off the line, her skirt soaked within seconds. From the barn, Silas yelled something she couldn't hear over the storm. Thunder cracked so close it rattled her bones. Then he was there, grabbing the rest of the clothes, his hat dripping, jaw clenched. He didn't say a word, just helped her drag the basket under the porch roof. Margaret gasped, brushing wet hair from her face. "Well," she said breathlessly, "so much for dry sheets." Silas gave a rare half-smile. "It's Montana. Wait 5 minutes, it'll snow." She laughed, surprised by the warmth in his voice. "You really should smile more, Mr. Boone. You have a very fine one." He blinked, caught off guard. "I don't make a habit of it." "Well," she said, wringing out her dress, "maybe you should." Later that evening, the three of them sat around the hearth. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled like wet grass and smoke. Millie was curled on the rug with a book, Margaret brushing out her damp hair near the fire. Silas sat in his chair, boots off, watching the flames, but his eyes kept drifting to Margaret. There was something different about her. She didn't fuss or pry. She didn't push past his silence, but somehow she filled the room without needing to. He cleared his throat. "You handle storms well." "I've had practice," she said softly. "Back east." Her eyes flickered. "Back everywhere." He nodded, sensing the edge in her voice, but choosing not to push it. Yet. She added another log to the fire. You know, pain doesn't just disappear, but if you don't let it breathe, it'll burn everything down from the inside. Silas stared at her, the firelight dancing in his tired eyes. You think I'm burning up inside? No, she said gently. I think you've been living in the ashes so long you forgot what warm feels like. Silas said nothing. Margaret leaned back, her eyes never leaving the fire. Millie's not the only one hoping for a new start, Silas. She just had the courage to say it out loud. He looked at his daughter, already asleep with the book on her chest. And then he looked at Margaret. Strange, stubborn, unexpected Margaret. Outside, the storm had passed. But something new was stirring in the room. Not quite love, not yet, but the warmth of it. The beginning of a fire that wouldn't go out. The knock came just after midday. Margaret was sweeping the front porch while Millie chased chickens across the yard giggling. Silas had gone into Bear Creek to pick up supplies, leaving the house in rare peace. When she opened the door, the man standing there stole the air from her lungs. "Margaret," he said, tipping his wide-brimmed hat, "didn't expect to find you in a place like this." He was tall, dressed in a dusty suit that didn't quite fit the wild country. The eastern accent rolled off his tongue like bourbon over ice. She clutched the broom like a rifle. "Thomas?" "I prefer Mr. Charles these days," he said with a smirk. "So this is where you ran." "I didn't run," she hissed, stepping out onto the porch to block his view inside. "I left. There's a difference." He gave a mock bow. "Forgive me. I didn't realize the difference was measured in miles and dishonesty." Millie appeared behind the doorframe, blinking up at the stranger. "Miss Margaret? Who's this?" Thomas smiled too easily. "Just an old friend." Margaret's tone turned sharp. "Millie, go inside." The girl hesitated but obeyed. Silas leaned on the porch rail, arms folded. "Who was he?" "Just someone from before." "You looked like you saw a ghost." "I might as well have," she muttered. "He came from St. Louis. My father sent him." Silas's eyes narrowed. "You said you came here because of Millie's letter." "I did," she said, "but it wasn't the only reason." She turned to face him fully now. "My father is a powerful man, controlling, cold. He promised me to another man when I turned 19. When I refused, I was locked in, kept away, watched. I took money, my own inheritance, and left in the night." Silas didn't speak. Tears brimmed in her eyes. "I never meant to deceive you, but I was afraid if I told you the truth, you'd send me back." Silas stepped forward slowly. "Margaret, I don't care what you escaped. What I care about is if you're staying." Her breath caught. "He gave me a week." He nodded. "Then we've got 6 days to make sure he regrets it." The danger had a face now, but so did love, and neither was backing down. The final day came quicker than Margaret had hoped. The skies turned pink over the Montana hills as she and Millie stood in the kitchen. Flour dusted the air. Pie crusts lay out like fragile promises. It should have been a quiet evening, a safe one, but a shadow stretched long across the land, the kind that doesn't vanish just because the sun goes down. Thomas had been watching the ranch from the ridge for 2 days, always out of reach, always reminding her time was running out. Silas knew. He said little, but his presence wrapped around her like a shield. He kept his rifle close, saddled 2 horses, studied the perimeter every morning. And each night he sat with her on the porch, silent under the stars, as if drawing strength from the sky itself. That night, Silas handed her a folded piece of paper. Her name was written on the front in thick, simple letters. "I ain't good with words," he said quietly, "but I wanted you to know what I'd say if I was." Margaret opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, in rough but careful handwriting, "You gave this house back its fire. You gave my daughter her smile. You gave me back my breath, though I didn't know I'd lost it. I don't want a wife out of pity or fear or pressure, but if you'll stay because you want to, then this is your home forever. If not, I'll still ride with you until you're safe. I ain't letting you go alone. Not anymore." Tears filled her eyes before she could speak. He gently reached for her hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you don't face it alone." Dawn broke gold and cold as Thomas returned, with 2 men on horseback and arrogance in his stride. "You had your week," he said, dismounting with a smirk. "Time to come home." "I am home," Margaret said, stepping in front of Silas. Thomas's smile slipped. "You'd throw away your family for a rancher with mud on his boots?" "I'd throw away everything that ever tried to own me," she said. He reached for her arm. Silas stepped forward, shotgun already raised. "I said she's not going anywhere she don't want to," he growled. The tension cracked like lightning. For a heartbeat, it looked like blood might be spilled. But then Thomas saw it. Not just Silas's rifle, but the 12 men from Bear Creek standing behind the fence. Ranch hands, townsfolk, neighbors. Silent, solid. He backed away. "You'll regret this." "No," Margaret said. "I finally won't." Thomas spat in the dirt and rode off, the other men trailing behind him like ghosts. That evening the land sang again. Chickens clucked, horses nickered in their stalls, laughter floated from the windows. Margaret leaned her head on Silas's shoulder. "Still think you don't need a wife?" He kissed her temple. "No, I think I needed you. I just didn't know it until you got here." She smiled a full smile now, one that finally belonged to her. The stars blinked awake above them, and this time there was no secret left to hide. Just love, and a home worth fighting for.
If you enjoyed listening to this story, do well to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comment section. See you on our next video. Toodles!